Okay, in this lesson, we're going to explain how to describe a line graph or bar chart for IELTS Task 1, that is over time. This uses an example of a bar chart in this lesson, but it will be the same for a line graph. So let's look at the types of language needed. When you get a chart or graph to describe, it is always important to check whether there is a time frame or not. If there is, you will need to use the language of change, for example increased, decreased. However, it's not enough just to describe the changes of each element, in this case ActiveX, Java and Net, on their own and ignore how they relate to each other. For example, if you look at the prompt of any question, it says summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. So you are asked to compare the data as well. So you must also compare the elements where relevant in your IELTS Task 1. For example, the most popular, lower, the least. So not just describing changes over time. So let's look at a bit of organisation. So you must also group the data together to make sure you have a well-organised and coherent answer. To do this, you need to look for similarities and differences when you first analyse the graph for IELTS Task 1 and decide what can be logically put together or not. So let's look at a sample graph and an answer so we can see how this all works. So now look at the bar chart and question below and read the IELTS Task 1 model answer. So here's the graph or the bar chart, and this is the kind of prompt you'll get. So the bar chart shows the number of times per week in thousands over 5 weeks that 3 computer packages were downloaded from the internet. And you can see that's ActiveX, Java and Net. So let's look at a full model answer. We'll just go through this briefly because we can look at it in more detail later, but you can pause the video once the full answer's there if you want to look at it a bit more closely before we go on. So first we have the introduction and overview. So the bar chart illustrates the download rate per week of ActiveX, Java and Net computer packages over a period of 5 weeks. And it can be seen as you look at the graph that ActiveX was the most popular package to download, Net was the least popular. The next body paragraph goes on to discuss ActiveX and Java as they both showed similar patterns. You can see they both increased. And this paragraph goes on to describe those increases. So pause the video if you want to look a bit closer at that and read it. And then the final paragraph is looking at Net, which was downloaded the least. It shows a bit of a different pattern because you look at it, the red one, you can see it fluctuates. So that's a full model answer, and we'll look at this a bit more closely now. So let's look at some examples of language of change that you'll need to use. So as you can see, there are several examples in this graph, so it's important to learn how to use these correctly in order to successfully write an IELTS Task 1 chart over time. Here are some examples: gradually increasing, a slight fall, reached a peak, increase sharply, finish at, finishing the period at. These are all things used in the graph. You will need to practice this type of language and also make sure you know a variety of structures to get a better score. If you keep repeating the same kind of phrases, this will show you have a more limited range of lexis and grammar and lead to you getting a lower score. So we looked at language of change, but let's look at also some examples of comparisons. So as I said earlier, you must also compare the data, as you are asked to do this in the rubric. If you just write about what happened to ActiveX, what happened to Java, and then what happened to Net, without showing any relationship between them, this won't be enough, and you'll be penalised in your scoring for it. Here are some examples of where comparisons are made between the products in the IELTS Task 1 graph, and the language of comparison is highlighted in bold red. So you can see, so here's some examples. It can clearly be seen that ActiveX was the most popular computer package to download, whilst Net was the least popular of the 3. That was in the overview. And these are taken from some of the body paragraphs. Downloads of ActiveX and Java showed similar patterns, with both gradually increasing from week 1 to week 5. However, the purchases of ActiveX remained significantly higher than that of the other products over this time frame. And some further ones: in week 1, purchases of ActiveX stood at around 75,000, while those of Java were at about 30,000 lower. Java downloads also increased at a steady rate. The product that was downloaded the least was Net. In contrast to the other two products, it fell. Then it increased sharply over the period of the following 2 weeks to finish at about 50,000, which was well below that of ActiveX. So you can see there's lots of comparisons in there. It doesn't just show increases and decreases. And as I mentioned earlier, it's important to group the data. This will help you to put it into different paragraphs and organize it well. So you need to group similar things in paragraphs or sections. If you look at the chart, you'll see that ActiveX and Java have a similar pattern, as we noted earlier, both steadily increasing over the period. Apart from there is a slight fall of ActiveX in week 4. So these could be put together as they both increased over the period. So this is an example of it, as we already looked at. This is in body paragraph 1. So you can see ActiveX and Java have been discussed together, and explains how they showed a similar trend, with both gradually increasing from week 1 to week 5. But then it compares some of the differences between them. So again, pause it if you want to look at that paragraph a bit further. On the other hand, though, Net is the lowest, and it has a different pattern. It falls and then rises again. So this could be described in another paragraph. And you can see that here. So the product that was downloaded the least was Net, and explains where it started and what it did in contrast to the other two products, and how it increased then at the end. It's important to say there is usually more than one way to group the data for an IELTS Task 1. So I'm not saying that this is a right or wrong answer. Well, it is a right answer, but there are other things you could do that could also be right. So you do have some flexibility with this. You just need to make sure it's well organised and a good decision. So as long as it is logical and makes your answer easy to follow and read, this should be okay. Okay, I hope you've enjoyed this lesson. There's lots more materials and courses at IELTSBuddy.com, and we have a page full of different kinds of paid courses and free courses for you to download and look at. Thank you.